All right. Good Monday evening, Giants and NFL fans. Pat Leonard here from the New York Daily News and the Believe Network. Welcome to Talkin Ball live here in early May of 2024. The Giants spring program is underway, post-draft, rookie minicamp coming up. Hopefully get to see players like Malik Neighbors on the field for the first time as Giants and be able to bring those images and those sights and sounds right to you. But here we are on a Monday in the spring program of the Giants, ready to talk about the 5 top Giants position players who must take a big step during OTAs and minicamp. We all know the obvious names, right? I left the quarterbacks out of this because it's self-explanatory that Daniel Jones and Drew Lock and players at that position need to step up. It's also self-explanatory that a big money acquisition like Brian Burns and a number 6 overall pick in Malik Neighbors as a rookie is going to be counted on big time on the offensive side of the ball there. But I think that there are 5 players who stand out on this roster who can take a next step, who have room to grow, and who must if the Giants intend to have the type of season that they want to have here in 2024 in year 3 of the Joe, Shane, and Brian Daboll regime. So I will get right to your questions after I get to my first player here, and that is number 5. We're gonna count down to number 1. Number 5 on our list of top 5 most important Giants position players this spring is Tyler Nubin, the second-round safety draft pick out of Minnesota. 55 college games, 43 starts, 4-year starter, and 13 interceptions for the Golden Gophers. Now, to me, Tyler Nubin stands out as a player who I think needs to step up and step in immediately, and he's critical to the success of the team right away, despite being a rookie, because his draft selection, in my opinion, spoke to how significant his play will be on the field for Daboll and for Shane Bowen's defense. It's essentially a replacement pick for Xavier McKinney's departure in free agency to the Green Bay Packers. Nubin is a rookie, but with that experience in college, starting that many games and being such a consistent player, if you look at his stat lines the last 2 to 3 years of college, just straight across the board, what you see is what you get when you look at Tyler Nubin and what he brought that defense in the Big Ten. And so the Giants do have Jason Pinnock already returning at the safety position. They have Jalen Mills, who they signed in free agency. But Mills is an older veteran who is here, by all appearances, to bridge the gap, let's say, to fill the holes, to step in on the field when he is needed, maybe to bring a rookie like Nubin along until Nubin can grab the reins, unless it doesn't take him much time at all. But sources I've talked to believe that the Nubin pick does speak to, while Dane Belton is a player that they believe is smart and capable of several things, he's taken the ball away when he's been on the field on defense, and he's become a leader on special teams. Nubin profiles as the type of player that the Giants selected to start and play significant snaps on this defense in 2024, and that is why he is my number 5 most important Giant for the spring OTA and minicamp program to step up and stand out. Before I get to number 4, I see Chris jumped in with a super chat and super sticker, setting a great example. This is one way that you can have your comment or question addressed first, is by paying for a super chat or super sticker. You jump to the top of the queue. Not necessary for you to do it. I will get to all of your questions. But if you're not going to purchase a super chat or super sticker, all I ask is that you give a thumbs up and hit that like button while we are on this live chat. If you missed this on the live video version on our YouTube page, the Talkin Ball Pat Leonard YouTube page at PL on NFL, you are probably listening to us now on Rewind on the Believe Network on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate, review, and subscribe on the YouTube page and on the pod if you haven't already. Let's get to Chris. He says, why don't the Giants just go ahead and cut Darren Waller? Even when healthy last year, he wasn't good. Chris, because if he retires, you save the same money that you would if you cut him. And at the moment, given the delicate nature of Waller's history, what he has dealt with personally, and then we obviously know he and his wife are getting divorced, and that got a little bit messy on social media with his soon-to-be ex-wife seemingly pointing the finger at him. There are clearly matters behind the scenes that are personal that the Giants don't want to screw around with or mess with, and they're trying to, at least by all appearances on the outside, provide the support he needs to reach that decision himself. And like I said, given his history, kind of battling addiction, things like that, this is the type of case where I think the Giants are trying to be supportive and do the right thing. So getting to my number 4, Chris, thank you for that super sticker and that super chat. Really appreciate you. Getting to my number 4 most important Giant position player for the spring. Number 4 on my list is Jalin Hyatt, the second year wide receiver out of Tennessee, a 3rd round pick, a player the Giants were very excited to get in the 3rd round of the 2023 draft, and who did have a 100-yard game in a win over the New England Patriots with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. However, he had only one game, that Patriots game, as a rookie, where he had more than 3 catches. He had 0 TDs on the season. And in his final 5 games of the year, he had 6 catches for 43 yards. Now, granted, you can go up and down the Giants' offense and find players whose stats did not look very good. When you talk about the Giants' 2023 offense, their failure to move the ball, their failure to score points. So it's not just Hyatt. But I list these stats to say that Hyatt has speed, he has potential, but he has to put it together for the Giants to be the team they want to be in 2024. And to me, the most encouraging play that Jalin Hyatt made as a rookie was that 4th down catch over the middle, taking a hit to make a play from Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo that kept that final drive alive and nearly led to what would have been a game-winning touchdown from Tyrod Taylor to Darren Waller if they had connected. Could have ended up being a game-winning pass interference call if they had blown that whistle there. The Giants ultimately don't win the game, but that stood out to me that Hyatt made that play over the middle when he caught a lot of criticism coming out of college and even early in the pros for not being able to do it all as a receiver when it comes to routes going to different places of the field. Now, I do think having a good spring for Hyatt means a couple things, because we saw him look pretty good on the field against the Giants DBs and in training camp and things like that. I think Jalin Hyatt needs to put on some muscle. And listen, I'm not his trainer, so there are experts who know more about that than I do. Aaron Wellman, for example, now working back with the Giants. People like him going to be working with Jalin Hyatt in charge of fortifying his body for the grind of the NFL regular season. Because I think Hyatt has the potential. Like, I've talked to coaches in the league who coming out of college, they felt like he was a Deshaun Jackson type game-breaking threat. But he needs to be able to stay on the field. Deshaun Jackson struggled with that in his career as well, being an undersized, speedy receiver, a thin receiver who, if he took a direct hit, often couldn't come back. Hyatt, I think, as a rookie, proved that he was tougher than people realized. But it's not going to be a surprise. Everybody knows what's coming. He's fast. He's going to push down the field. They're going to try to stretch the field with him. And for Daniel Jones or Drew Lock and for Brian Daboll's offense to work, Hyatt needs to turn on the jets, make the plays. I will say the Raiders game that the Giants lost when Daniel Jones got hurt, that game, Jalin Hyatt got downfield for what could have been 2 enormous completions. At least one, maybe 2 of them even would have been touchdowns if Daniel Jones had hit him in stride. So we've seen it in flashes. We've seen it in spurts. We've seen Jalin Hyatt show us what he can do by taking the top off of defenses. But it needs to connect, and it needs to connect significantly and consistently. Malik Neighbors' presence, of course, is intended to and hopefully will open up opportunities for everybody else. But when we talk about springs where I want to see guys take the next step into training camp and into their next season, Jalin Hyatt comes in at number 4 on our list of most important Giants for this spring. Chris with another super sticker says, can Hyatt be good with a quarterback that will not throw the ball down the field? Well, Chris, I think in that Raiders game, Daniel was throwing the ball down the field to Jalin Hyatt. However, If you remember, that was the game where he came back from the neck injury and he was throwing the ball differently. I will go to my grave believing and knowing, even though Daniel wouldn't acknowledge it, that his mechanics in that game of his throwing were off based on whatever nerve issues he was experiencing from that neck injury. Now, there are supposedly no lasting effects from that for Daniel. That's the word on the street. That's what Daniel has said. But we will see when we're watching him throw on the field. But certainly I think Daniel is aware, Chris, that for this to work, he has to become that type of player and passer. The question is whether he can, because they did try to cut him loose last season, and it resulted in some key mistakes or in the offensive line not being able to hold up enough, right? So that's where we stand there. Savage Steve says, I still feel like this team needs cornerback help. Is that a fair assessment? And any potential trades or free agent signings, is there any buzz? In answer to Savage Steve's question, first, I'm going to take a sip of this old-fashioned. Cheers to all of you who are here for the Talkin Ball Live. Love the community that we've built here. And thank you for being such loyal followers, participants for the channel and these chats. Savage Steve's question brings me to number 3 on my list of the most important Giants position players this spring and in minicamp. Cordell Flott. Cordell Flott, a third-year player, battled some injuries as a rookie, right? Last year, though, it seemed like he was starting to put it together. He had an interception. He had 5 passes defended, a forced fumble, and his snaps went up on defense. He had 335 as a rookie. He played 518 on defense last year. They took him off of special teams, exclusively playing defense, 14 games and 7 starts. And this is a player who has played a lot of inside. They've been looking, though, middle of last year, those types of things. They were looking at him on the outside as well, seeing how he can flex. He is a long corner who can run. And in my opinion, Steve, Cordell Flott is the best example of a Joe Schoen draft pick who you can see the obvious development year to year so far in. You could put a couple other players in that category to an extent, but Cordell Flott being a mid-rounder and a guy who seems like he's starting to put it together, and who, when you make these types of picks and they hit, this player elevates in year 3 to the type of contributor that can help change your depth chart and team, Steve. And so I agree with you that I still think, especially on the veteran end, and we'll get to this conversation later, on the veteran end, I still would like to see more experience in the Giants secondary and at corner, especially that outside corner spot. But right now, it looks like Cordell Flott, Nick McLeod are the 2 guys battling it out there. And frankly, Steve, I think Cordell Flott is especially key to me. Think about how high I'm putting him on this list right now. This is the entire team, position players, right? The reason I'm putting him this high is not only because I think of the potential he has to elevate, it's also because I think the best version of the Giants secondary for this season probably has Cordell Flott on the field. So they need him to play at a high level to be on the field, because that either means he wins that corner spot outside outright and somebody such as Drew Phillips, the rookie, steps into the slot. But more likely, it's hard to expect a 3rd-round rookie like Drew Phillips to just step in and be a starting corner in the slot covering CeeDee Lamb, right? Or Devontae Smith in the slot, or whatever it is. I think it's more likely that the ideal scenario, Steve, for the Giants secondary still has Cordell Flott in the slot with Banks on the one side. And if McLeod wins that job on the outside and can be that guy, awesome. But I still think some veteran reinforcements would be valuable, at least for the competition, let alone for kind of navigating the peaks and hills and valleys of what the regular season will be. But Cordell Flott comes in at number 3 on our list. Savage Steve, no buzz at the moment on other names that are popping up for the Giants in that regard. But keeping my ear to the ground on that, because I do agree with you. That's a position to zero in on and key in on. And that is why Cordell Flott is so high on this list. Joel says, Pat, how fast do you see the coaching staff moving Evan Neal to guard in camp? I'm sure he won't win the tackle job. Joel, I will get to your question in a second. Jacob says, smash that like and sub button for Pat on your way in. Appreciate you, Jacob. And it looks like we already got to your first question. How do you see Flott versus Drew Phillips competition playing out? I'd see Flott winning it at the slot unless he ends up being the outside guy, right? That's what I would say. All right. So let's get to number 2 on our list. This is the top 5 Giants position players that I need to see more from and see them ascend in OTAs and minicamp. Number 2 is Kayvon Thibodeaux. Of course, high draft pick, a guy who had 11.5 sacks last year, finally got in that category, got those numbers up, was finishing those plays in the backfield. But we all know that some other areas of his game were lacking, areas in his game that were more buttoned up and better as a rookie, especially that kind of that setting that edge run defense, right? Now, I do think Kayvon Thibodeaux, along with many other defensive players, were victim of playing defense on a team that couldn't score any points on offense. And so I do think that, not that it's an excuse, I do think a lot of Giants defensive players last year at certain points, and it was different for different guys, but definitely when you got to the mid to late part of that season, there was a lot of shoulder slumping at different points because it was very difficult to believe that the team was going to turn things around no matter how well they were playing on defense or how many turnovers they were forcing. So I do think Kayvon was a victim of that. But this is part of the reason I bring that up, is because you're going to have adversity this year, maybe more than you had last season. And I don't think that Kayvon is going to step into a captaincy necessarily on the defense. But I do think what he can do for the Giants is become the dominant player they drafted him to be in all facets. And with Brian Burns on the other side, paid to, of course, be an even better player than he's been, if Kayvon turns that dial up and you have those two guys going with Dex winning in the middle, it could be a special defensive line. But that's why I think Kayvon unlocking some greatness, consistent greatness, is a key to a lot of it. So 12 TFLs last year, 16 quarterback hits, 11.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, but only 1 sack in his last 6 games. So what I want to see from Kayvon is, I want to see him commit to the fitness element, the stamina element, the endurance element. I want to see him looking cut to shreds. I want to see Kayvon Thibodeaux looking like he's been in the gym all offseason. I want to see Kayvon Thibodeaux to be somebody who other teams fear, right? We know that he can win one-on-one at times. We know that he's had a sack fumble for a touchdown in his rookie year in Washington. He made a splash play against the Baltimore Ravens that helped them upset Lamar Jackson in his rookie year as well, in the year they went to the playoffs. I want to see him turn the dial up, and I want to see him take it up a notch. And obviously, he was the first draft pick of Joe Schoen's entire GM tenure in New York. So just a player who represents a lot of what they want to be and what they could be. And even though what matters most is what you do on Sundays in the fall, right? It starts now. It starts here. And Thibodeaux, through the spring and mini camp and training camp, needs to become a guy that people fear around the league. And to get to Joel's question was, how fast do I see the coaching staff moving Evan Neal to guard in camp? He believes he won't win the tackle job. So my number 1 position player who needs to have a strong spring and OTAs and mini camp for the Giants is the right tackle, Evan Neal, the number 7 overall pick of Joe Schoen's 2022 draft class. We all know the story, right? Evan is a young tackle who's taken some lumps. He's playing that right side. He played left tackle, left guard, and right tackle in college. The Giants drafted him because he had that right tackle experience. They believed he could do it. He's battled some things, not just on the field, but also mentally, right? The criticism that comes with playing in New York, watching people criticize on social media and play Twitter GM when they don't know what the play call was, and pointing it out and mocking you and putting you on blast. And Evan Neal, of course, at a certain point, struggled to react the correct way to all of that in his second season. And it kind of all went bad from there. But it wasn't all Evan Neal's fault. He had an injury on his ankle that was misdiagnosed as a sprain that turned out to be a fracture. That cost him the ability to get back on the field late in the season and have a better feeling going into a pivotal third year. That's all behind us now, though. And the good thing about Evan Neal is he's working hard to prove the Giants right, to prove Joe Schoen right, to prove them correct that drafting him number 7 wasn't a mistake. But that's what's so critical to the Giants, and that's why he is my number one player, position player on the Giants roster, who needs to have a strong spring, strong OTA program, and strong mini camp all the way through mid-June leading into training camp in July. It's because if Evan Neal wins the right tackle job, the Giants look like a strong and deep line with Jermaine Illuminor not necessarily having an obvious place in the starting lineup unless he beats somebody out for guard. And it's not going to be John Runyon Jr. because what the Giants paid him. So it would be Snee, Illuminor, having depth, having 6 guys who should be starting and only being able to start 5. That's a good problem to have. That's a problem the Giants don't typically have, that they never have, right? So Evan Neal, if he plays well enough, comes into camp in shape, he's healthy, and he can win that job, right? If he can lock that down. Or even if he plays so well that even if Illuminor wins the job, if Evan Neal has a fresh mind and a clean slate, and he proves that he can actually be a swing tackle behind Andrew Thomas and Illuminor, these are all the things that can help unlock parts of Brian Daboll's offense that we haven't seen, that can help Daniel Jones prove that they should have paid him and that it wasn't a mistake, or that could help Drew Lock if Daniel Jones isn't in there, buy him an extra half second to push the ball downfield to a Malik Neighbors or a Jalin Hyatt. But if Evan Neal fails, or if he slips, or if he isn't able to elevate his game, if he's not able to get back healthy fast enough, now you have that absence of depth at tackle. Now you have to count exclusively on the new guys you brought in. And now you're looking also at the solidification of a number. Is that a word? You're looking at the number 6 overall pick of the 2022 NFL draft being a bust. And that would be Joe Schoen's pick. That would be one of his defining draft picks, and a pick that it would be difficult for the Giants to overcome even in year 3 of that player's career. So those are my top 5 position players for the Giants, and I'm looking forward to elevate their games, have strong spring OTAs and minicamp. Tyler Nubin, Jalin Hyatt, Cordell Flott, Kayvon Thibodeaux, and Evan Neal. And of course, we said quarterbacks go without saying. Malik Neighbors, Brian Burns obviously need to be the players the Giants traded, signed, and drafted them to be. And, there are other players, of course, who can step up, right? John Runyon Jr. got paid as a free agent guard. You need something from him. John Michael Schmitz, the second-year player, right? He had a lot of experience in college. So even though he was a rookie last year and a little bit of it was baptism by fire, John Michael Schmitz needs to step on offense as well. But in the end, these are the 5 players that I have identified whose performance, I believe, starting in this spring can really help fill some gaps and kind of complete the picture of what the Giants look like this season. Of course, as Joel mentioned in his question, Evan Neal could end up being shifted to guard if it proves early on that his tackle play remains subpar. And we all know, I've talked to Justin Pugh on my podcast about the fact that Pugh felt like left guard would suit Evan Neal ultimately. And Pugh remembered being a guy who was thrust into a right tackle spot and a tackle situation as a young player and ended up only feeling comfortable and settling in when he got moved to left guard. Let's see. Okay, Jacob says, I see Bellinger and Johnson as the same type of tight end. Do you agree? Yeah, Theo, the rookie, and Bellinger, similar players in the sense that they are extremely impressive looking athletes who have height, have size, and have the ability to both block and catch the football, but were still on the draft board a little bit later for a reason. Could be like speed and blocking ability like Bellinger. Could be Johnson, like more of a raw, let's keep developing this guy, not a elite hands, right? Good hands, not elite hands. I do think Johnson has more upside though, Jacob, and I think that was what that pick was about. There's upside there that I think Bellinger works hard. I like Daniel a lot, but I do think Johnson's upside makes him different there. Okay, let's see. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Remember, this is the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live podcast. We do this Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern time here on the YouTube channel. It's the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard YouTube channel at PL on NFL. Subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on those notifications for all of the content that'll be coming your way. News, analysis. We break news on these live chats, so you don't want to miss them. I will, if I have news, I will break it here before I put it on other parts of social media if I can help it, if I can hold it here, or if it comes in right before we go live. We've done that at least 2 or 3 times since we've started these regularly in the last month or two, and that's always made for an exciting chat. If you are already subscribed, remember, follow us, P Leonard NYDN on Twitter or X, and PL on NFL on Instagram and TikTok and Threads as well. You can purchase a super chat or a super sticker to have your comment or question elevated to the top of the queue and answered first, or just ask your questions. I will get to them in turn, and hit those like buttons while we are live. That live engagement helps push to the rest of YouTube that we are going, and the algorithm does its work and brings more Giants and NFL fans here. And that's why this channel is growing. We actually had a 3rd straight month of record viewership. So thank you so much. So that's February, March, and now April, all 3 months, better and better, more views, more engagement, and more good feedback from you guys, not only about that you like the content I'm bringing you, but also constructive criticism on what you feel is working, what you feel is not. I do appreciate all of it. It's helping me craft the type of product and insight and conversations and dialogue and content I think that brings you guys kind of the best full circle, full context outlook on your favorite team and favorite sport. And just so you know, for those of you who have asked, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard shop is underway. So the swag is coming. The gear is on its way. It's in the development stages now, and you will, sooner rather than later, be able to purchase Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard gear if you care to through this YouTube channel here. Also working on memberships and levels and perks for people who want to get further in on the inside of what we do here. And for those of you who are new, I cover the Giants daily for the New York Daily News, as well as the entire NFL as the paper's NFL columnist. And what we do that's unique here is I'm coming out of the Giants locker room and practices and my constant phone conversations and text messages with sources in the organization and around the league, and I'm bringing it to you. And during the season in the fall, we also do post-game live chats where I'm at the Giants stadium, whether it's in East Rutherford at MetLife or on the road, wherever they are going. And I come out of the locker room after the game. I quickly file my story to the New York Daily News that's final. And then I go live with you, the fans, from the stadium, from the press box. And I download with you with news, injury updates, information, player quotes, my own analysis of what happened, what I saw live with my own eyes, what I saw on the sideline. How did Brian Daboll react? How did other members of the organization react? This is the type of stuff no one else is doing, and I feel like you guys can get on the inside as close as you can be without having the press credential yourself to what I'm seeing and what I'm doing and what's up with your favorite team. So thank you so much for being here, and that's just a little sneak peek on what we have coming up ahead. All right. Jacob says, what do you think of the Chris Snee news? Okay, we just hired Chris Snee as a scout. Yeah, so this is something that was supposed to happen several years ago, and Snee was rebuffed, was my understanding initially. So it's good to hear that he is now being welcomed into the organization. I think this is an obvious fit. I was just talking to somebody about this prior to the draft, about how this should have happened, how it still could happen, how it needs to happen. And the fact of the matter is the Giants have had problems year on end. It's decades on end now, right? It's at least a decade of the Giants misevaluating offensive linemen, overspending, overdrafting, right? Andrew Thomas was a hit, but by and large, the Giants have failed in this regard. And so I think Chris Snee coming on and being a part of the organization is nothing but positive. Snee is a great ambassador for the team. He is a good person, and he represents obviously a part of Giants history that the franchise and the organization is looking to get back to, looking to replicate, looking to kind of restore the greatness that they once had, that Snee was a part of. And I think bringing a personality and a talent evaluator and a person like that back into the organization can only do good. So it's overdue by this regime to do that. Rick said, have you heard of any scouting or operations staff departures coming? Will Brandon Brown interview for the GM job in New England? You know, Rick, I would expect Brandon Brown to get an interview there. I don't know if that is definitely going to happen. Their search just got underway, but he is a promising young candidate who was a finalist for the Chargers job. So I think it would be natural for him to get a look from the Patriots. I think if the Patriots were actually doing due diligence, which is what they are professed to be doing now, I do think Brandon Brown deserves, and it's a mandatory that he would receive a conversation if you're doing a full scope search from New England. Very interesting how the Patriots are playing this, right? With Elliott Wolf there running the draft, not essentially being the official GM. And now they're doing this search for a de facto general manager. But Rick, typically this time of year, you do see some of those things coming about. Bring those to you when I have them. Michael, good to see you, man. I know you commented early, but wanted to kind of bring you guys the talking point to get set and get started. By the way, some other things I wanted to talk about tonight, if you guys want, who's going to be the Giants leaders this offseason and going into the 2024 year. I think that's a big thing to focus on. I think we'll talk more about it throughout the spring and summer. But I wrote for the New York Daily News on Tuesday, May 7th. If you pick up the Daily News or if you want to go online and read it on nydailynews.com, a story about how the Giants really have lost a lot of leaders from last year's team. And so they do have some key ones returning, such as Bobby Okereke, Dexter Lawrence, etc., Andrew Thomas. However, they're going to need some new guys to step up. And so I do think that's an interesting element of this team that is overlooked maybe, is the fact that they're going to have to come together as a new group quickly, with probably a lot of new faces to the locker room needing to step in, assert themselves, and lead the team in a certain way, right? So I think that'll be interesting. Also, the NFL schedule is going to be released soon. As we sit here on May 6th, it's possible to be later this week or early the following week. I still think you could end up later this week as we get towards Giants rookie minicamp as well. But we could see it happening the following week in May. Either way, I have some thoughts, very early thoughts on what I would like to see that would help the Giants on their 2024 schedule. So something for us to talk about as well. Brolo says, damn, queuing up the questions already, boys. Yeah, people were in here early, getting it going. Loving this community. You guys are such diehards. Joey B, what's going on? He says his top 5 are Daniel, and Daniel. Little Chappelle, Dylon action there. I like it. Brolo says Evan Neal, Flott, and Aziz in a contract year. Jacob says Kayvon is at the Knicks game. Would expect nothing less. The stars are out. McFadden. Brolo, yes, I agree with that. McFadden, you need to see a little bit more from him. You saw promise and flashes from Micah McFadden last year, right? And another step. Now what you need to see is fewer missed tackles, right? You saw some games where he looked like, especially early on when Bobby Okereke was still getting the lay of the land and feeling things out, Micah was playing fast, playing hard-nosed football, and really stood out in the first couple games of the season there. The Dallas game, he was like one of the only Giants I came out of that game being impressed by. San Francisco, right? But just like any player who is hardworking and talented, but also has some limitations, you also saw reasons why he wasn't drafted in the second round, right? So, yeah, can Micah McFadden be more than that? We'll see, but definitely he's going to have to play meaningful snaps throughout this season as a starter and as a reliable, especially run stopper for the Giants, something that they've struggled with as a defense and as a team year in and year out. And so, Brolo, you're absolutely right. McFadden also a guy that needs to. Joey B says he believes Wan'Dale, McFadden, Pinnock, Evan Neal, and John Michael Schmitz. Yeah, Wan'Dale, I just think Wan'Dale is the type of player who he's going to provide a certain value. I feel like there's a ceiling and a cap on what that is. I don't think, even though he's a player who can help be a game changer for them, I don't think he's the make or break, like land, hit or miss player on the offense, but he's obviously going to be a key component of what they do. Jason Pinnock, of course, needs to at least maintain a level, but certainly take another step. I think that's a good one. And John Michael Schmitz, yes, definitely another player that you need to take another step. A lot that the Giants need to happen in a lot of different facets this year for them to come around, round into form, and be the type of team they need to be. Let's see. Brolo likes Wan'Dale if he stays healthy. He says, honestly, Hyatt, if Slayton isn't re-signed, he needs to get better. Yes, absolutely. That goes even more for Jalin Hyatt if Darius Slayton, for some reason, gets traded away. Joey B wants to know if the Giants can't cut Waller for fear of relapse. He says that's on him. You've got to want sobriety. Yeah, Joey, I would say that, these are factors and elements of a person's situation that the Giants and Darren Waller are not going to get into in any detail, right? And like I said, there's a lot of facets to his situation. So it's not as cut and dried as one or another. But I think you're going to see a resolution soon. Brolo says Hyatt's got to get the routes up. Tim says, should the Giants cut Waller and then trade for Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts? I do expect Waller not to be playing for the Giants this season, and maybe the Giants can add a little bit, to replace with another weapon, maybe like take a flyer on somebody, Timothy. We'll see. Definitely, like I said before, even though the Giants are tight on cap space, you can tinker with the salary cap and figure out ways to fit something in and kick money down the road. If the Giants can find a way to add a weapon or to try to add something or take a risk reward type element on their offense to see what hits, it's worth it, because this is a year that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll face pressure. Brolo says, I know we're excited about Burns, but do you see a career year for Azeez? With increased depth, he has a chance to stay healthy and leverage production into another contract. Brolo, one thing I'll say about that is sometimes players have big contract years, because there's a lot riding on it. And suddenly all the things that maybe they were not paying as close enough attention to, or they weren't detail oriented, they kind of put it all together because, of course, everything's riding on it, right? And Azeez is not the kind of guy, I can tell you, who needs a contract year to motivate him. So I would say certainly it's possible. And yeah, I mean, he's the bendiest around the edge rusher, right, that they've had on the team the last several years. He's struggled to stay healthy, but he hasn't struggled to stay healthy because of laziness or a lack of attention to detail or anything like that. The kid tries, the young man tries. So it's possible, but also I would say this isn't a player who, kind of coasts for the first few years, and then when it's a contract year, puts it all together and actually tries for the first time. Like, Azeez is a diligent, hardworking, humble guy. So that doesn't mean he's not going to have a great contract year, but I'm just saying he's not a guy who needs a lift by his contract situation, I guess is how I would put it. Brolo says Flott was making plays in that Vikings playoff game. Yes, good point. Good point. Dr. Garrett says, hi, Pat, off-topic question. Who was your favorite GM and head coach during your time covering the Giants, and why? Good question, Dr. Garrett. So my favorite GM, so I've covered Jerry Reese, Dave Gettleman, and Joe Schoen. So Joe Schoen is the GM who I don't think he's done a good enough job picking players, right? But I do like his process, his overall process. And when he talks about why he did things, I like his thought process the most. Jerry Reese, once I got to know him, I think that I really identified exactly with where he was coming from. And I feel like he was underappreciated in a lot of ways. Obviously, kind of the way he handled himself publicly, he was never going to warm himself to many people publicly by how he carried all of that. So I do like Jerry Reese and respect his track record a lot, but it was hard to kind of get to know him. Dave Gettleman, I saw him kind of pop off a little bit recently. Always good to hear from, a backseat driver who wasn't able to steer the car on the road about how other people should be able to drive themselves. But yeah, I guess my answer would be Joe Schoen as GM. And then head coach was Joe Judge. And I don't hesitate even answering that because Joe Judge, of course, made some key mistakes, had some flaws. Of course, how to manage the offensive side of the ball once Jason Garrett was gone, wasn't able to kind of keep it afloat there. But I thought Joe Judge, as far as putting a program in place, a set of expectations, and being a CEO who was able to kind of get the Giants as an organization out of the mess they were in and back on track, like the amount of things that Joe Judge did during the COVID year, especially with organizing their team on teams initiatives and getting the team to work with the community and involved in that way through constant Zooms and monthly meetings and efforts and initiatives. Like, he was very organized and very detailed, and I think severely underappreciated, and he catches a lot of heat publicly. For, of course, the Chicago press conference is the thing that, if you're Joe Judge, you would want to go back and take back. But at that moment, everything he was saying was accurate. It was just not the right forum to do it. But I do think that from what I could see behind the scenes, he was a great leader for the Giants. And I thought that ripping the Band-Aid off after 2 years there, tying him to Gettleman for a second year, the hiring of Garrett as his OC when there were other people that he would have preferred from my vantage point, all of those things I think just ended up, along with some of the mistakes he made, costing him. But he was the favorite head coach I covered. Savage Steve says, my favorite drink is a whiskey sour. Cheers to you, Savage Steve. Kyler says, can you see Slayton snaps going down and Hyatt's going up? If Hyatt can move into Slayton's spot, how soon do you think it'll happen? Well, Kyler, I think it would happen if they ended up obviously trading Slayton over the contract, right? They could end up possibly going into camp. And then if Hyatt plays to a certain level and they can actually get value for Slayton, maybe you drag it out and then make that trade at that point, right? That would be an option. I do think, though, Kyler, like with Hyatt, you need to see it in games. And what I mean by that is we obviously saw it in the Patriots game. And like I said, he got over the defense against the Raiders, and we nearly saw it in that game if Daniel Jones hits him. But I do believe that Slayton is underappreciated for him being an established NFL player. I think it's easier said than done that Hyatt would just overtake him. So I think that is part of the reason why Hyatt is such a key player this spring and summer, is because he needs to show it. He needs to actually do it. So obviously you draft a guy in the third round like that, a Biletnikoff award winner, an electric wide receiver in college in the SEC, and a guy who I believe scored how many touchdowns did he score when Joe Schoen saw him live in college? So we know that he can be explosive. But I do think, listen, here's another thing. These quarterbacks, like as much as speed obviously matters and taking the top of the defense matters, experience and route running and savviness and intelligence, all of those things matter too. Darius Slayton is a savvy vet at this point, and he's a reliable guy. I know he's had some drop issues, but first of all, he's had drop issues, but I do think it follows him around more than it should based on what he provides compared to other people. And so I guess my vantage point is for the Giants to be the best thing they can be, Hyatt needs to take another step. And if he ends up being so good that you don't need Darius Slayton, then, well, now that's a good thing to hear, right? Because that means Hyatt is that much of a player. But I do think it's dangerous to just assume, like, let's get Slayton out of this lineup and Hyatt in. I would pump the brakes on that. That's what I would do. Scorpio says, Evan Neal will be fine. Can we judge him after 3 years before we label him a bust? Scorpio, no, for sure. That's exactly what I'm saying, Scorpio. That's exactly what I'm saying. I totally agree with you. I'm saying that if he doesn't put it together this year, then it looks like he is a clear bust. And obviously there are people labeling that now. And listen, without the injury last year, with everything else that went on, if he had played the full season and had played poorly throughout the full season and also had that blow up at the fans and all that, then I would be ready right now to say, enough. But that misdiagnosis of his ankle, Evan Neal was being brought back as if he had a sprain. He was being, trained and worked on and, evaluated by the doctors as if he had a sprain and he had a fracture. So he ended up back on the practice field, suffering a setback and never getting back on the field. So to me, Scorpio, it's unfair, especially because of that in the context with Evan Neal. It's unfair to count him out and to call him a bust because that part was out of his control. That's not his fault. That's the Giants and the doctors and all the people who evaluated him. That's their fault, right? They need to figure that out. Jim says, Pat, agree with you with Kayvon. Right now, he's not at Carl Banks level, much less Lawrence Taylor. Thoughts? Oh, yeah. No, I mean, he's not. No, naming those men with Kayvon Thibodeaux is not no offense to Kayvon, but no, he does not belong in the same conversation with those names. Jim, I think Kayvon thrives on being a guy who makes a big play in the big spot. And I think that's what you need to see right now. So I was having a conversation with somebody today about this in the NFL. Okay. When you look at the NFL, it's kind of like the NBA. If you look at an NBA team, right? If your NBA team has one star player and the team you're playing against has 3 star players, it's pretty easy to do the math that, okay, there's 5 guys on the court for each team. They have 3 great players. We have 1. It's going to be tough to win this game, right? It's easy to see and say in the NBA. In the NFL, it's tougher, right? It's a more complicated game as far as the number of people on the field, the X's and O's, the strategies. And you look at, 53, 55 man, rosters, 46, 48 game day, all these players who factor in. But it's pretty simple. It's simpler than you think. If you just go back to every NFL roster and you circle the elite players on each roster and then make a list. Make a list of Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, Commanders, Niners, Bengals, Chiefs, whoever. Make a list of all those teams and the elite players on each team. And it's pretty easy from there to rank the teams 1 to 32. I mean, it's not going to be like exactly apples to apples based on the numbers. But my point is this. The Giants need A-listers. They need better depth. Yes, they need that second corner, like Steve said. Yes, absolutely. They need all these things. They need stars. They need guys who grab the game by the neck and rip it off the field and say, this is mine, right? And that's what Kayvon needs to be for them. Kayvon needs to be a destroyer, not a guy who, hey, big name, not a great game today, but he had a sack, so maybe he'll get to 10. No. None of that. You got to be a game wrecker. You got to be a guy who people walk off the field and say, holy shit, did you see that guy, right? Did you see Kayvon Thibodeaux, right? That's what it's got to be. Let's see. Timothy says, Pat, should the Giants trade Evan Neal to the Bucks for Tristan Wirfs? Wirfs is way better than Neal. So, Timothy, I like that you're creating scenarios, but here's the deal. Put yourself in the Bucks' shoes there. Why would you make that trade if you were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Non-starter, right? Like if you were in a fantasy football league, you can't be offering a guy who's underperforming for you for that team's biggest star, right? But I see what you're saying is like, hey, if we're not going to play this guy and he's just going to fall by the wayside, can we get value here, right? The problem is, Timothy, When guys don't have value for you, it's hard to get value for them anywhere else. So it's kind of a catch-22. You want the player to play better for you, but in order for him to have value to be traded, he also has to play better, right? So, yeah. But I see what you're saying. Hirsch, what's going on? Good to see you, man. Chip says Slayton has been a true professional and a team player. Indeed, he has. Dr. Garrett says that's a great point about how much of Daboll's playbook we haven't seen the last 2 years because of the inability to block. Garrett, I do believe so. And here's the thing, Dr. Garrett, too. That's not all on other things other than Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll is the person crafting the offense. You need to find ways to get the ball out and create space and give guys opportunities to make plays no matter what your offensive line looks like, right? So the bottom line is that's also on Brian. That's also on the play caller. Last year, that was Kafka. This year, it's expected to be Brian Daboll. But certainly, Dr. Garrett, especially as the season went on last year, they had to kind of rein in what they were looking to do at times because they knew they couldn't block it. Brolo says, I agree, Chris. I think Darius Slayton should be re-signed. He's been consistent, has improved his drops. He's a giant to me. Agreed. Hirsch says, Pat, if the Giants are picking top 5 in the 2025 draft, you'd have to be thinking drafting a quarterback. Absolutely, Hirsch. And I continue to do reporting on a story about what they should do for QB in 2025. Of course, you have to wait and see how this season plays out. I mean, which is, of course, an annoying answer if you're looking for a real answer, but obviously that's the case, right? Depending on how Daniel Jones does, how the team does, where they end up in the draft, all those things. Free agents, which guys get re-signed, which guys don't, all of that. But I will say that most people's like standard answer right now is, oh, they'll just be drafting one next year, right? And so, yes, if they're drafting top 5 next year, they will have a new coach 100%. They will be drafting a quarterback, and it's possible they'll have a new GM. Christopher says, hey, Pat and friends, what did I miss? My only problem is how are they signing these UDFAs? Are they showing signs of promise? So, Christopher, each team gets allotted an amount of money that they can use on UDFAs. So, actually, I can give it to you right here. Let me see. There's an allotment every year. For these teams. I can't track it down right now. Bottom line is, Chris, every NFL team each year gets an amount of money that they can use as signing bonus money to sign undrafted players to get them to come to the Giants instead of the Eagles or the Saints or whatever. And so they divvy up that money how they see fit. And every team does that to fill out their 90-man roster for the spring and going into training camp. And so you'll see breakdowns of guys they bring in at different positions. Obviously, it's hard to sit here and look at an undrafted free agent class and expect anybody to just step in and produce right away. That's not a fair expectation for undrafted free agents out of the gate. It does happen, right? And so, that'll be something to monitor for this rookie mini camp is which undrafted free agents have they invested most in and which guys are standing out. Vince G says, I just subscribed. Thank you, Vince. Really appreciate you. Welcome to the community. Super Unknown says, what's up, Pat? Knicks are a must-watch tonight later. Super Unknown, no offense taken. I totally understand. And I'll just be totally honest with you. I got invited tonight to play basketball in a league, right? I got invited, or not only did I get invited to play basketball, but the Knicks are on, right? I said no to hoops, and I watched the Little Knicks earlier, and I turned it off because I want to be here with you guys. Because I know even if you're watching the Knicks on your phone and watching me on this computer, or if you're watching the Knicks on television and me on the phone, I want to be able to bring you guys the Giants insight that you're looking for. And I know it's May. I know this is the slow time of the year. But let me be honest with you guys. We're picking it up here on Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard. These Talkin Ball lives are getting traction because of you guys. We are getting news broken in here. We are bringing analysis to you that you're not finding anywhere And we are kind of setting the stage for what I promise you is going to be an exciting and an unprecedented season from the standpoint of how I cover the team. I'm going to cover the team this year differently than I've ever covered it before, thanks to how we're doing things here. So Super Unknown, no offense. Thanks for even checking in for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it was. Vince says, I'm hopeful the Giants make the playoffs this season. Going to be tough, Vince. If they make the playoffs, I'm going to end up eating my words as well as a lot of other people. And if they make the playoffs, Daniel Jones is allowed to basically roast, I think, me and a lot of other people, right? Joey B says, this is the best damn content for the Giants on the web. Let's go, Joey B. Day oneer, Joey B. Appreciate you. Brolo says, I'm hoping we can get rid of Dable before he can cook. I'm hoping we don't get rid of Dable before he can cook, although I hope he gets better managing games and stop scaring off coaches. I wish he would develop linemen like the Cowboys and Eagles. Brolo, all of that very well said. Can't really add to that. That's great insight. Vince says, when Snee, Deal, Richie, O'Hara, and McKenzie was the last time the Giants had a quality offensive line. That's right. Larry Long checking in. Welcome, Larry. Thanks for being here, as always. Vince says, do you think there is any way Trey Hawkins doesn't make the roster this season? Those things are possible, Vince. I mean, Trey is a draft pick, so you usually don't see a second-year draft pick fall off that quickly. Good kid, too, but definitely a guy who was struggling to hang as a rookie. Now, rookie seasons where guys struggle to hang as late-round picks aren't reasons to cut him out of the gate. But I would say this, Vince. For a good NFL team, to be a good NFL team, you want to create the kind of competition where if guys can't hang, they do fall off. And you don't want that to happen to Trey. But I'm just saying, I agree with your thinking about, like, let's bring guys in to compete here. And if somebody can't hang, they're out. That is how good teams operate, unfortunately. Vince says he thinks the Giants will be fine at tight end with Bellinger and Theo Johnson. Joey says, at this point, I think Waller is out, man. He's done, injured and issues. It's sad to see. He's a great guy, but this is kind of messing up the chemistry and the team going into the season. Yeah, I don't think anybody expects him to actually play, but we'll see. Vince says, I agree. I think they're waiting after June 1st due to cap implications. Vince, unless they use the June 1st designations on other people, there's no reason to do that because you get 2 June 1st designations on cuts. And so they could have just cut him or had him retired now and taken the June 1st money on June 2nd. So I checked into that and I'm not sure that's the case because they could have just done that already. Jacob says, could Snee being a scout maybe give a different look to the way we scout or develop offensive linemen? I mean, Jacob, that's the entire purpose to it. And like I said, this was something that was supposed to happen years ago and got rebuffed. So finally happening. Vince says Gettleman was a horrible decision for GM. He was terrible in Carolina. Absolutely. John says Shane is an empty suit so far. Jan with a $1.99 super sticker says Evan Neal won't be a bust. Not great, but average. So Jan feels that Evan Neal will step up and be serviceable. Listen, even if he's just serviceable as a Giants stopgap, as a backup, as a rotational swing tackle, whatever it is, you'll take it right now for the Giants compared to a player who can't handle being on the field or handle the pressure of the market, which is what he was early last season. But like I said, with the injury, with everything, he deserves this year 3 to prove what he is and isn't. All right. Thank you for the super sticker there, Jan. Hirsch says, crazy that Shane has never drafted a QB as Giants GM. Hirsch, what a great point. Cheers to you. So, Hirsch, what's fascinating about that is it is a fact that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll took their jobs believing that this was likely going to be a Daniel Jones for a year and, let's draft our own quarterback, right? As this kind of turns over and we rebuild. and making the playoffs in the way Daniel played in that construct of the Dable offense that year. It changed everything. And I saw one of the fans was debating with me on our comments on the YouTube channel this afternoon whether Daniel Jones was actually Joe Schoen and Brian Dable's quarterback. And I thought that was fascinating because the fact of the matter is they flipped from viewing this as we're going to be drafting our own guy and this is playing out the string to paying him a 4-year, $160 million contract extension. Now, granted, they did leave an out for after their second year. So there was clear still like waffling and hedging on that full commitment and that long-term commitment. And I thought, given the circumstances, if the organization was going to give him that type of deal, that Schoen did the best he could with that circumstance, if that was the case. But all of that said, they still paid him and gave him that money and committed that money and committed those resources. And he is their quarterback now. And so to Hirsch's point, even though they scouted all these QBs and they tried to trade up for Drake May and they did all that work and they had Russell Wilson visit and they signed Drew Lock, Daniel Jones is here and he signed and, they paid him. So he's their guy. It's amazing what they came in and what it was looking like and what they thought it was going to be versus what it is now. I think Hirsch makes a great point there. Scott says, why would the Giants trade Slayton? He's been our best receiver. Yeah, Scott. So, the only reason they would trade him would be if he holds out into the summer over the contract and the Giants are playing hardball with him and it gets to the point where they're not going to pay him and he's not going to report and that kind of thing. But like I said, guy needs to create value for you to get value in return on those trades. And certainly the Giants don't have the kind of offense yet, as we were talking about earlier, where you can't just say Jalin Hyatt's going to be what Darius Slayton was and trade him. I mean, you want him to be, you need him to be for this offense to function at its highest level, but can he be? He hasn't been yet, right? He's a young player. I'm not blaming him for it. I'm just saying, what have we seen versus what do we want to see, right? Yes, if Waller retires, the Giants will get some cap relief this year. Vince says Evan needs to play at 320. 360 is way too heavy, in my opinion. Absolutely. He's also a top-heavy person just by nature of his build. He's just a big guy, and he's top-heavy. So that's another reason. Todd says, same theory. Did they bring back Jones too early from the neck injury? Clearly in the Raider game, he was off and usually very accurate. Yes, his throwing motion was off in that game. I will go to my grave telling you guys that was the case. If you watch it, listen, there's a lot of things I don't know about. One thing I do know is how Daniel Jones throws the football. I go to every damn Giants practice there is. I know what it looks like. And he threw the ball different in that Raiders game. No doubt about it. Hey, West, what's going on? Good to see you. A2Z Me says, hey, Pat, summer is finally here. I got my first mosquito bite today. Go Blue. That's right. I was out there playing some baseball too. Had the bugs flying around my neck and my hat. So definitely you're feeling the sun on your neck. It's a good feeling. Joey B, TL with PL, Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. I like it. You want that on the shirt? Chris, I see you down there. What's up, man? A2Z Me says, playoffs. Crowd favorite says, can the Giants make the playoffs? I don't personally think so, but crazy things have happened, right? Christopher Tony says, hey, Pat, what position will the Giants bolster in free agency? Chris, I think that outside corner spot for a vet trying to continue to just add competition there is where they should keep looking. Also defensive tackle. But really, I think most likely the roster you're looking at right now as we sit here in May is a lot like what you're going to see in the season outside of like one or two guys. Joey B keeping us updated on the Knicks. Vince G says, I didn't realize that with Waller. Thanks, Pat. Chris says, everyone is wanting to get rid of Waller. Let the offseason play out. It's not like him being on the roster affected the draft. True. Reasons that Slayton won't get traded. Drafted Wandale, Hyatt, and Neighbors. This offense with this QB barely uses 3 wide receivers. Oh, that he would get traded. They barely use 3 wide receivers, let alone 4. Yeah, Chris, no, I mean, that's what I said. And also, Another reason Darius Slayton would get traded would be, now this is a hypothetical, but obviously he's trying to press the issue on the contract, right? But if Joe Schoen and the Giants are indicating they're not going to revisit the contract and we just paid you, as Joe Schoen basically said in that press conference, then Darius Slayton's a smart guy. His agent's smart guys. They know the lay of the land. It's possible they could be kind of executing this stay away in the spring because ultimately they wouldn't mind a trade. They want to get paid and stay in New York, and Darius Slayton's good friends with Daniel and all that. But if it comes to a trade, that he wouldn't mind it because contract year, go somewhere, hopefully with a better team, better quarterback, and earn more money in free agency because of the year you have with a better offense, right? So that's like a type of thing that you have to look at, from the Slayton angle. Now, Chris, you're absolutely right that the Giants, if they can't keep 3 receivers on the field consistently, then what use do they have for a guy like Slayton if they have all these young guys? I would say, though, too, it's dangerous to have that inexperienced of a receiving core and that unproven of a receiving core, right? I mean, yeah, this is a rebuild, but you don't go into seasons threadbare with guys on experience and production and kind of proven worth in big spots, which that scares me a little bit. But certainly the best version of the Giants, Chris, involves all 3 of the young receivers that you just said having big roles, which could end up meaning, okay, if Slayton's on the way out after this season, then you trade him for value at some point, right? Something the Giants didn't do, let's say, with like a Saquon Barkley last year when they should have. So I hear you. Brolo says, I see Andrew Thomas, Dex, Bobby being leaders, possibly Nubin and Neighbors, JMS, just shots in the dark here. The Knicks get a win, okay? So, Brolo, thank you for kicking us into the leadership question. So, right, Andrew Thomas, Dexter, Daniel, Graham Gano, these are guys who return as captains from last year. So it's not like the Giants are devoid of leadership, right? They have guys coming back from the team last year who were captains. The issue is they lost Saquon Barkley and they lost Xavier McKinney. And they let them go, obviously, right? And they let them go to free agency to the Philadelphia Eagles and Green Bay Packers, respectively. But Saquon Barkley was the face of this franchise and a guy who, if he doesn't keep it together and bury his frustrations last year, this team and this season goes off the rails. If Xavier McKinney, if the defense as it functioned, even though Bobby Okereke stepped into a big-time leadership role, Xavier playing 100% of the snaps, breaking the team down before every game, very vocal guy on the field, making plays, had a couple interceptions late in the year. Like, this is a guy who was a big part of what they were. Adoree Jackson's gone. Leonard Williams is gone. Julian Love from 2 years ago is gone. Darren Waller likely to retire. He was a captain. He's expected to be gone. And not only that, think about Tyrod Taylor, Justin Pugh, Darius Slayton if he's leaving. Like, this is a lot of either captains or just veteran steady leaders. I would even throw Ben Bredesen as like a steady set an example guy on the team, like a guy that people respected, right? Just a steady presence. The Giants have a lot of new blood, a lot of young new blood. And then there's some pressure on the new guys to just step in and lead. Brian Burns, John Runyon Jr., guys like that. JMS, I think, is a guy who he's younger, but he also had 6 years in college. So he's a rookie, but he had 6 years in college. He has experience. And as the center, you need him to be nasty and you do need him to be a leader, but it's just such a young team. Like, I did the math today and I just played out what their starting 11 on both sides of the ball might look like. And the starting 11 I gave them today, I had them under 25 years old on average on both sides of the ball. I had them under 25 on offense, 24.7, I think, and 24.8 on defense. And listen to this. As of Monday, May 6th, the Giants have only 8 players 30 years old or older. So That's 7, excluding Darren Waller. So if you take Darren Waller out, there's only 7. And if you take out Graham Gano, Casey Kreider, 2 special teamers, so you have them. And then there's 5 players on offense and defense who are at least 30 years old on the Giants roster as of right now, May 6, 2024. 4 of them are new this year. So 5 guys on offense or defense, 30 years old or older, and 4 of them are new. So that's Aaron Snee, Jalen Mills, Jordan Phillips, and Chris Manhertz, the tight end. Raheem Nunez-Roches, the only one who's still on the team on offense or defense who's 30 years old or older. How crazy is that? So all of that goes to show, Brolo, in my opinion, like you have 4 months basically as Brian Daboll and let's remember the quarterback who's going to be playing most snaps in the spring, Drew Lock, he's new too. So if you're Brian Daboll, you have only 4 months for your leadership, not only to kind of get to know each other and to form and to identify and to create like a mindset and an identity for the team, but you need to be ready to go as a team week 1, right? For the Giants. And that leadership group, therefore, needs to be fortified and set and formed. And that's a tough thing to do in that short amount of time, man. It really, really is. It really is. Last things I wanted to bring up on the schedule. Some things I would like to see from the Giants schedule. The schedule release coming up here in May. And we'll get into more of this probably on Thursday. But definitely think you want to catch Washington early. Jaden Daniels, rookie quarterback. Rookie head coach Dan Quinn over there. Obviously, he's been a head coach before, but just kind of a new fledgling operation. I think the Commanders will probably start getting better the more they play together and they kind of form their identity. And Daniels gets some NFL snaps under him. So I think you want to catch the Commanders early if you can. Cincinnati, too, Burrow coming back, a team that late in the year would just be a nightmare to face, kind of making the playoff push and playing their best ball. Not saying they would be easy to play early, but I would just rather kind of try to catch them by surprise in week 3 rather than facing them in week 13 when they're getting ready to challenge for the Super Bowl and they just wipe you out. And then Seattle, I would like to catch them early too. New coach and Mike McDonald, new identity, just a team that who knows what they're going to be, but with a rookie head coach there, I'd just rather kind of jump them and get there quickly and see if I can steal a win from a coach kind of still learning the ropes. And obviously somebody earlier mentioned that Brian Daboll has struggled with game management. Those are things that maybe these rookie head coaches are struggling with even more. Chris says, I'm wondering how good or bad the offensive line of the Commanders will be with their new offensive line coach, Bobby Johnson. That's funny. I think Bobby definitely got scapegoated by the Giants and was one of many people kind of pointed at for being the reason why the Giants lost and weren't any good last year while some other people kept their jobs. It is going to be better. I mean, they got Tyler Biadasz from Dallas, a guy obviously Dan Quinn brings over. He knows what he brings as a former Cowboy and as a leader, as a good player. Nick Allegretti, of course, they signed from Kansas City. Still working on, they got, Cosme and Cornelius Lucas at the tackle spots. They're not going to be perfect on the offensive line for sure. So still not a unit that is one to be quote unquote feared, but it will be better for sure. Jacob says, by the way, shout out to this great panel for doing amazing play-by-play. Pat, if we have bad season, any shot Brandon Brown is a scapegoat. If they have a bad season, I think they have a new coach for sure and maybe a new GM too. Pat, if you were Daboll, who is your quarterback week 1, says Alex. Alex, I think I would let the training camp and preseason battle decide that. And I'm not skirting the question from you, but what I'm saying is that I think that Daniel Jones, if he gets healthy and he looked good and great and he's operating the offense at the highest level on your roster, then that's who you go with. If Drew Lock plays well and outplays Daniel Jones spring, summer, whenever they're both on the field, whenever they're able to show, if Drew Lock outplays him, then he's my starter. That's what I think needs to happen, Alex. I think the best quarterback for the Giants throughout the offseason and training camp needs to be the starter in week 1. That's what I think. And I think Brian Daboll has no choice in the matter. I don't care what you're paying Daniel Jones. I know that's a factor. I don't care. You got to play whoever's the best quarterback. And Daniel's the better quarterback when he's playing at his best. There's no question about that. Daniel's better than Drew Lock when he's playing at his best. So I'm not sitting here saying it should be Drew Lock. Definitely. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the quarterback who's playing the best ball should be their starter there. So, guys, you guys have been great. This has been a great chat, as always. I'm glad we could talk about my top 5 Giants who I think need to have the strong spring OTA and minicamp programs. And I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about leadership. And here comes Tuto, the man, checking in with a $5 super chat saying massive salutes and respects to Pat and all diehard Knicks fans across the pond. Greetings from our entire rugby team currently training in Edinburgh, Scotland. I'm jealous, Tuto. Tuto, are you a golfer? Because I've never been to Scotland. But, man, I got to get over there to Scotland, hit some links golf, maybe catch a little bit of rugby training while I'm at it. It's golf season now here in New York, New Jersey, the tri-state area. The weather's finally turning a little bit. So you mentioned Scotland, and I think of the links. That's what I think of. But Tuto, we thank you so much here for all of your support, as always, for checking in. Big Knicks win here in New York, so the fans are celebrating. But we're still talking Giants, talking ball here. And we thank you so much for your support, Tuto, a day oneer, just like Joey B, somebody who always supports the channel. Really appreciate that, Tuto. Guys, so if you don't already, hit subscribe on the channel. It's at PL on NFL on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, on Threads as well. On X or Twitter, it's P Leonard NYDN. You can follow me, Pat Leonard, the NFL columnist and Giants beat writer for the New York Daily News, on nydailynews.com/sports. I have a story up right now about the Giants' leadership void alongside some of these returning guys like Bobby Okereke, Daniel Jones, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, Graham Gano, needing some other people to step up, right? I have that on the website as well, so go check that out. We also have more content coming. If you missed it earlier, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard swag shop is coming in. It's coming up. We're developing the gear now. It's going to be available if you're interested. I know Joey B was asking about it. Hats, T-shirts, sweatshirts, whatever you want. I'll be rocking them soon. Hopefully you can get those through the YouTube store sooner rather than later. Also working on some membership options for the YouTube channel. We'll have member-only live chats at other points in the weeks. Maybe if I have a special kind of breaking news element, we'll get it to you on an off night and get kind of the core membership group in on that. Maybe that community grows as well. But definitely some things in the hopper for the off season, for training camp, for the regular season. Really excited about what we're doing here. So Tuto says, Pat, we also play golf, but we're too tough playing golf. We always break down irons, mate. Sometimes I do too if I miss that shot, Tuto. You know what I mean? Christopher says he had the same thought at quarterback for week 1. Appreciate you, Chris. Yeah. Like I said earlier, Joe Shane, John Mara, the Giants say they want competition, so bring it. Bring it at every position, including quarterback. Alex says, one last follow-up. Who gets the first team snaps in practice? If they should be split, how? Alex, that's a great question. Here's the deal. In the spring, as Daniel Jones rehabs, it's expected that Drew Lock is taking the snaps when we start watching them in OTAs, and that Daniel's going to start working his way back to health. And then in training camp, when Daniel's healthy, he would be first team snaps, QB1, etc. But if Lock has a good spring and you're really making it a competition, you got to split it up, right? I think the Giants, of course, from John Mara's point of view, from the organization's point of view, I could easily see them not splitting the first team snaps at all, which I think would be ludicrous if it came to that point. But I think the breakdown right now, Alex, is Drew Lock is expected to take significant snaps in the spring while Daniel Jones continues to rehab. Hopefully, Daniel Jones gets healthy enough to compete in training camp to be QB1 in training camp. Drew Lock's also coming along, playing preseason games, training camp practices, etc. And if you're really making it a competition, I think, Alex, you bring up a really good point. You're ahead of the curve here because this wasn't even something I was thinking about, but you're absolutely right. That's something the Giants really, if they intend to make this a competition, need to be thinking about is how to divvy up those snaps in training camp for Drew Lock to prove with those same players on the field that he's the guy. But unfortunately, Alex, like I saw Davis Webb outperform Eli Manning for a full training camp and Eli start over him. I've seen Tyrod Taylor outperform Daniel Jones and Daniel Jones start over him. So that's typically the way it goes in Giants land. Chris says, thanks for everything you do to keep us informed and engaged, Pat. I appreciate you, Chris. You're always here, always participating. Really appreciate you. Larry says it's 9 a.m. in the Philippines and he's checking in. I love it. Tuto's here from Edinburgh, Scotland. Larry's here from the Philippines. Chris checking in. Joey B. Who we have? We had Chris checking in with a couple of super chats. We have Jan and Tuto. Really, I know I thank you guys a lot, but I can't thank you enough for all the support for the channel, for the chat. This has been another great Talkin Ball Live. And remember, we're sponsored here by Bet Online and by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Essencia Day Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 1798. Takes 3 seconds to make a nice coffee. I drink it all the time when I'm doing Talkin Ball. JJ says, you are really informative, Pat. Thank you, bro. JJ, thank you. And like I said, if you guys are unaware, if you're new, if you're just jumping in now, if you didn't do this while we were here last season, during the games, the Giants games in the fall, what I do is I cover the games live for the Daily News. I go into the Giants locker room, into the press conferences after. I talk to Brian Daboll. I talk to the players. I come back up to the locker room. I write my story for the Daily News quickly because I already have a story filed for them. I just touch it up with quotes. I reframe it however I need to. Once I file that, last season we started this on Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard. I go live with you guys right here the night of the Giants game, whether it's a 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever it is. I go live from the stadium and I bring you inside information from the locker room. What did players say? What are injury updates? What are we looking at? What's my analysis, right? What are my observations live from the stadium? Like, these are things that you're not getting anywhere else. And what I just really value the ability. It's a privilege for me to have that access. And so I want to bring that to you guys, the fans. And so I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing in the fall with all of that. And I encourage you, to stick around, to subscribe if you don't already, and to stay engaged because it's really going to be a special season. I can promise you. Jacob says, can you go over the comp picks and if we get any for Saquon and Xavier McKinney? So I saw Nick Corte from Over the Cap. And listen, Nick is the authority on this. So Nick does excellent work, and there's no point in trying to pretend like I know how the formula works that he works on. But he posted today. So here's how Nick explained it. So I'll explain it to you. He said that the Giants, have a 4th round pick on the board for comp picks for Xavier McKinney leaving for Green Bay. But it depends on what happens with Ben Bredeson and how he qualifies as a free agent with the Bucs. So the Bucs drafted Graham Barton from Duke in the 1st round. So if Bredeson doesn't start and he doesn't qualify, then the 4th rounder becomes a 7th rounder, and the Giants really don't get anything at all. But if Bredeson does win the starting job with Tampa and he does start there, then that helps the Giants, and that helps him as a qualifying free agent, and that helps the Giants get that 4th for McKinney in the long run. So everything hinges right now, according to Nick Corte, and you can find him. So his X account is at Nick Corte. It's NickKorte. You follow him. He is excellent at explaining and breaking down those comp pick formulas, Jacob, and he's the guy to go to. I am not the expert on that. I'll tell you that right now. If I'm getting information on that and bringing it to you, I'm getting it from him. So I'm sending you to Nick because he knows more than I do. But that's the breakdown of that. Jacob says, Pat, you're a real G. No reporter out there like you, buddy. Appreciate you, Jacob, thank you for being so loyal. Jacob always gets us started here, reminds everybody to subscribe and to hit the like button. Jacob, I really appreciate you. You're always the first one in, last one out, as they like to say about the star quarterbacks, right? First one in, last one out. That's you, man. I appreciate you. And we got a new subscriber. Alex just subscribed. Alex, thank you so much. Yeah, listen, it's crazy that I haven't done this sooner than last season, but I'm glad I finally found you guys and found this platform and found this element to share my insights and information and be this directly connected to you guys. So this has been an awesome live chat. Thursday night, what will that be? Thursday, May 9th. We will come back. We'll probably be talking more schedule. We'll be previewing the Giants rookie minicamp and getting more into, what it's going to look like this spring for the Giants. I will leave you with this. As the NFL schedule release comes up and is on its way, the Giants playing in Germany is a possibility against the Carolina Panthers in Munich. We don't know definitely as we're recording this it's going to happen. I have a hunch that it could, but nothing official. No one's told me that it's definitely happening. Just doesn't make a lot of sense to me that people were telling me back in March that the Giants might wait a year because they need to be the home team because they now that have the rights there. I mean, let's just put it this way. The Giants sent their media team all the way across the pond to Germany for the NFL draft to do something from the ground over there in Germany. Amani Toomer was over there. Like, I find it hard to believe they invested all that and put all that into it just to say that wait till next year, right? I don't follow that. So, I think before the full schedule comes out, it's possible you could see an announcement that the Giants are going to Munich to play the Carolina Panthers. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for being here, guys. Yes, BBU, we just talked about that, that the Bredesen, whether he wins a job or not, affects that. Nick Corte is the one who dropped that knowledge. BBU, thanks for bringing that to the chat. I appreciate you. Thanks for everybody who tuned in here on a busy night with the Knicks playing game 1 against the Indiana Pacers. You guys are diehards. If you missed the full live chat, you can go rewatch or re-listen on Apple, Spotify, or on the YouTube channel at PL on NFL. This has been Pat Leonard from the New York Daily News and the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody who checked in with the super chats and super stickers. Thank you for supporting, and I will see you here next time. Look for more special episodes of the podcast with special guests, unpacking the Giants draft, and forecasting their spring, summer, and fall. See you next time.